esports fans, Gill Frost here, and I'm really happy to be bringing you another episode of the Owl's Nest. And joining me to do that, to give you all of the fun times, I've got ZP and Nebtune here. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
Good, man. Good. Had a great weekend. Got to help out with the NYXL and Houston Outlaws charity match. Lone Star Vanguard took on the 5 Deadly Venoms and came out on top. So it was a fantastic weekend for me. How about you, man?
Super good. Enjoying all the great Overwatch action. Where you talk about a great week in Overwatch, you had some of the closest games we've seen in a long time, not only from OWL, but from the contender side as well. Everywhere you look, there's been high-quality Overwatch action as of late.
Yeah, I just remember people, the naysayers, not but 6 months ago, worried about the state of Overwatch right here, right now, and I'm here to say that Overwatch has won. The ecosystem is as strong as ever, and it just keeps getting better and better.
You say there's going to be a drought, and then everyone is drowning in just a cornucopia of games to watch.
I literally can't even watch them all, but that's why we're here. We're here to kind of talk about a few of those games, just a drop in the bucket overall, and that, of course, is the Houston Outlaws performance last week. So it was a little bit of a frustrating week. If you look at that win column and loss column, they only got, well, they lost both of their matches. Spoiler alert. If you're watching this and you didn't want those, then you're watching the wrong show. But maybe just go watch those again now and pretend I didn't say anything. But no, yeah, so they were very close matches, though. Of course, Philly Fusion and the New York Excelsior, two of the top teams, arguably, in the field right now, and they were both 3-2. So, I mean, broad strokes, what were your major high-level takeaways out of this week?
I mean, first of all, taking a look at the Fusion versus Outlaws matchup, we are starting to get into this trend where if you look at from an outside perspective, it's like, oh, Outlaws are playing Fusion. I guess this is going to end up a 3-2 in favor of Philly, where both of these teams, look, they play each other incredibly close every time they match up. And the interesting thing is that it feels like it's a different storyline every time, where now you take a look at, obviously the Outlaws have retooled a bit over time and how they're running. We saw the addition of Fact Fiction, but the biggest difference, I would say, overall, as the matchup has gone from or evolved over time, is that we've seen just the emergence of Snillo, where now you go up against the Fusion and you have to worry about this ridiculous Tracer threat that has quite literally come of age over the course of the Overwatch League, where he started out the season at 17, now 18, making a big impact.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's actually, we're going to visit that storyline a little bit later, because Tracer, very important topic to cover for this week in general, not only for the Outlaws, but across the board. But I want to go back to the tank thing you mentioned there. Of course, Fact Fiction coming in here. I believe he played 2 maps this week. One won, one lost, but he played Volskaya, I believe, was kind of his specialty map, and maybe Route 66.
He played both Volskayas and he played a Route 66. So his Volskaya he was undefeated on, and this makes sense, right? Where if you're going to be mixing in a new tank, you go for one game mode first, where you go, okay, we're going to make you our assault specialist, right? Where you leave movement to the other maps and you go, we're going to have more setup plays here, and we'll run Fact specifically in this because they did want to mix in Fact, who, of course, a very accomplished player within the scene, former member of Team USA, one of the most highly regarded Western tanks. So it makes sense that they would start him out on assault, and I mean, look, it worked out well, and it wasn't a Reinhardt Winston thing. It's like, no, we're going to bring in Fact, we're going to put him on Winston, and we're going to use him in a different way than Muma, where Muma, as a player, generally values his survival and can get out fights more easily. When Fact was engaging, he would pick a good moment, and the Outlaws would commit behind him, and it came to very good results, particularly in the assault game mode.
Yeah, so it seems like they really were playing, it was more of a map-based strategy, that maybe you can put different players into different practice modes where they're really focusing on a different map. So, Nebtune, I really am curious as to your thoughts. What do you think about that idea of having players that are focused specifically on specific maps or map types and having multiple looks?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, when you think about it, think of it like the pinch hitter or the pinch runner in baseball, right? It's the concept that you have someone there that's there to fit that role perfectly, and you might as well have that sort of roster where you can really flex and show what you can really do on these maps and have your full tool set on display. Not to mention, I think it's a great example of, if your front runner is out sick, then we can have somebody who can fill their place that's used to it, right? We saw this earlier with Linkser whenever he was out sick, and it was a struggle to kind of come in there and find somebody that kind of help with that backup. So the deeper that roster goes, the happier I am, and the more that we also see that kind of situation where there's that internal competition between the two, right? Of how do I one-up you? How do I learn from you? How do I level up? And I think, honestly, it's more healthy for the team.
Yeah, and I think right now I'm already noticing that it's been a strength for them. Maybe even just looking at Fact Fiction's 2-1 record, I guess, so far in just a very small sample size. I can't wait to see how that storyline continues to move forward. But talking about tools, we talk about Tracer. And we mentioned it earlier. There's a very big theme in Overwatch League in general, but definitely for this last week, and definitely for the Houston Outlaws. So we talked about Snillo on the side of Philadelphia Fusion. Had an amazing week and really has been unlocked on that Philadelphia Fusion roster. And then we move into the second match. Of course, NYXL, Sale Biobi, arguably the best or in the top 3, at the very least, Tracers in the world. And he also was doing fabulous work on that side. So I want to take a look at the DPS lineup for the Houston Outlaws because, you know, they have Linkser on Tracer sometimes. Of course, Jake plays Tracer sometimes. So ZP, if you had to choose a Tracer, who are you going with on the side of the Houston Outlaws?
So between both of them, I don't think either is really a natural Tracer player. Linkser has been far more comfortable historically on the one-shot hit scan DPSs and McCree and Widow, and also certainly on his projectile DPS play. So, you know, that is sort of the thing that Houston has had to deal with, is that they don't have the typical, hi, I'm in Tracer jail the entire time, but I do super well on it, and they sort of have to adapt around it. And between the two, I do think it's better when you have Jake on other heroes. You put Jake on, whether it be the Genji, certainly the Junkrat, perhaps is most notable, or even Sombra's work to some degree so far in Stage 3. It's usually better, but there are points where you're going to put Jake on the Tracer when both are in the same game, right? Where if you want a big Widow play, Jake does not have Widow in his pool. So that's a moment where no matter what, you would have to put Jake on the Tracer there and then Linkser off to the Widow. So going forward, I mean, I don't think it's really the ideal situation for either of the two, but the Outlaws make do pretty well. I think the one area where it gets really rough for them is on control maps, where I would say that in terms of Tracer play for Hybrid, Assault, Escort, they can make the most of it by focusing on tanks, and they don't need the Tracer player to quite be as crazy heroic as you see from others. But in Control, because of how skirmishy it is, you do see a big difference on maps where the Outlaws can run, say, a Junkrat as opposed to a Tracer, areas of Nepal, for example, where that works out well for them. Yeah. But you go to something like, you know, a more standard setup, whether it be Oasis or, you know, more wide open areas of Control, I do think the lack of that just Tracer god does certainly hurt them right now.
And that showed in the results this week. The only control map that they were able to pull out victory on this week was Nepal. And guess who was playing that Junkrat? And I think, you know, he did play Tracer and, you know, a little bit here and there, but definitely feeling the strongest on that Junkrat. So now we've got Arhan coming in, and this is a little bit speculative because we don't really have much recent data on Arhan, but we're expecting him to be playing more of that Genji. So if he comes in and fills that more Genji specialist role, how does that unlock the DPS potential when you talk about tools for the Houston Outlaws?
I think you have like a nice wider amount of tools there, right? With the Genji you have there, that's opened up. Yes, Linkser is definitely not used to the Tracer, but his Tracer definitely is, between him and Jake, probably the better. Jake, you still have the projectiles, you still have Junkrat and whatnot. I feel like you have a little bit more flexibility, and you can kind of find the right tool set to dial into what exactly you need for that particular matchup. Again, I think it fits to the theme where Outlaws at the very beginning was, this is what we have, this is our 6, this is what we do, and we kind of flex a little bit. But now we're starting to see a new era of the Outlaws where it's, okay, we kind of have a little bit to pick and choose. We need a little bit of Fact Fiction. We need a little bit of Jake, and you know, we find the nice, beautiful cacophony of everything, right?
I think what you'll see here is maps that historically you would see more situations where you might say run a Widow and a Genji at the same time. That would be the perfect situation to run Linkser Arhan, right? Where Arhan, going back to his Apex days, has historically made a name for himself on Genji first and foremost, where any map that Genji is going to be used as sort of a main hero, and you would expect to see Genji most of the time by most of the teams in that meta, you're going to be seeing Arhan playing. It shouldn't be a huge stretch to say that he will be the best Genji on the team, if that is still his focus and, you know, he doesn't come in and suddenly underperform, which, by the way, not unexpected. You take a look at players like Flower coming in contenders. It is not unheard of for a new player to come in and not perform well. Now, obviously, if you're a fan of the Outlaws, you would hope that's not the case for Arhan, but I have to be realistic. While you want to hope that a player of Arhan's pedigree comes in and does well, you know, you don't know until you see him take the field. But it's going to be very interesting when Arhan does come in to see if he can just sort of be a shutdown Genji, and if we will be seeing more compositions where you'll see McCree or Link's on a McCree or Widow backed up by, say, Arhan's Genji, which could be pretty viable in some of the maps.
No, for sure. How dare you, though, bring realism into this equation at all? I prefer blind optimism when it comes to these teams. No, okay, but yeah, very realistic look at what we could expect. Another reason why this next week is going to be really exciting to watch. I really want to see how if they can work in Arhan a little bit here within the next couple of weeks. If that does kind of infuse them with more options that they can then flex their muscles a little bit more and maybe get back on the upturn, you know, having had a struggle the last couple of, maybe more than a couple of matches. Yeah. But either way, so let's take a look at this upcoming week. By the time this airs, we will have already seen them play against the Mayhem. Mm-hmm. So really quick, basic expectations for the Mayhem match.
We should win that free.
Yeah.
I think that's
real
pretty
talk.
Safe. Yeah.
So I do think Florida's been on the rise here. I would say that if you get the Outlaws that played XL very, very closely, on paper the Outlaws should have an edge, but it's hard to say because Florida has been evolving pretty rapidly since adding Saya Player, an awesome guy, to the team. Mm-hmm. I would say Florida right now is a wild card where it's unclear how they're going to match up against certain teams right now. And even if you would go in saying, okay, the Outlaws should still be favored, the fact that they lost the last two matches is not entirely indicative of where their skill level is. I don't know. It does seem to have the makings where if it is an upset to a degree and Florida does take it, I'm not going to be surprised. So we'll see. I do think the Outlaws end up taking that match, but I think it's probably the strongest Florida will have ever looked against them, or really in general this stage.
I would definitely agree with that, but it would be a couple of steps for me for them to play at that level. Well, I mean, I guess you can judge us because you can go right now as we're posting this video, I think, and see the results. So judge us for our predictions. That's why I'm trying to hedge my bets here a little bit. No, but really the match that we're looking forward to, if Mayhem is a little bit of an unknown quantity, the Dallas Fuel may be a little bit more of a known quantity coming into Saturday. So what are we expecting for this Dallas Fuel? This everything's bigger in the match on Saturday, Battle for Texas.
Well, it's very simple, right? It's Ramen Day. And the reason why it's Ramen Day is that when you're in that matchup, you can wait for AKM to get on Genji, and then you simply put your ramen in the microwave, and then when you see his blade is up, your ramen is done. Now, in fairness, I'm memeing a little bit here. AKM is a very, very good soldier, but Dallas does have some issues in who they're putting on certain roles, right? Where it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to look at AKM's history as a player and go, okay, putting him Genji is not a good idea. The fact that he plays it in OWL and has a very poor result, it's not a surprise. He's a hit scan guy, and Fuel is in turmoil right now, pure and simple. They don't really have everything in order. I'm not sure they'll have things in order by the end of the stage. Obviously, when you let your coach go, you let a main projectile DPS go, and you're just kind of putting things in and going, I hope this works. Well, a lot of times it doesn't. So in the Texas Showdown, which is a very heated rivalry, I do think the Outlaws have a pretty sound advantage moving in.
I agree. I think that if anything, Fuel can look at this as a building year, and they can figure out what they need to put together to ultimately find success, maybe going into the next year. But there's been so much turmoil from the very beginning that I do not know how this is going to go for them at all. I feel like between losing Kai, losing Rascal, which just seems like all these decisions keeps coming out. I know that they talk about in the AMA having like a bit of a reset button, and they want to try some new things. I think it's great, and I want to see what they bring to the table. I wish them the best, but I think I'm definitely going to side with the Outlaws for this one.
To a degree, I just kind of wonder who's leading on the team right now, because you think the classical Envious and the key shot callers that you had way back in the day, obviously Harry Hook had a huge impact on the shot calling. Taimu had a huge impact on the shot calling. There was never like one dedicated caller, but you had a lot of very vocal people that are not getting the play time that they used to get. Obviously, Taimu in particular has been spending a lot of time on the bench, and sort of the identity of what was the Envious team now, Fuel has been just sort of scattered to the 7 wins. Then you have Custa, who's coming up as a team leader, one of their additions here, gets traded to the Valiant. I don't know who's actually leading this team in game anymore, and it seems like it's been a process even internally. So when you're dealing with those issues, it makes it very difficult as you go in the match. It's like, oh yeah, we still have to beat a team that historically has done really well against us.
Yeah, they are deconstructing so that they can try to build something, reconstruct the team. And the problem is right now, it doesn't seem like they've finished that process. We certainly haven't seen any results of it, and we're not expecting the changes that they're hoping come about by some of these movements. They're hoping that they come about maybe in more of a long-term setting, because all the short-term fixes that they've come out with have not really yielded results, which is why I think we're all pretty much firmly putting the Outlaws in the winners column of that match. So outside of that, let's just take it back to an even higher level. So what are our expectations coming out of the Outlaws for the stage? Right now, I think we're in 9th place in the stage. Is there a chance we make stage playoffs, or are we looking towards stage 4 and the greater end of the season?
Mathematically, it is almost impossible that they are going to get through and get to stage playoffs. It would require a lot of upsets, and not just in the Outlaws playing well, right? The Outlaws would have to basically win out, but they would need help, and teams like Valiant and Boston starting to drop games pretty heavily. Not impossible, but it's not looking super likely. Bigger picture, it's still very likely that the Outlaws could end up in the final league playoffs, but they will have to sort of solidify and find issues to what's been plaguing them through the middle of stage 2 and a little bit of stage 3, and find a play style that they can actually get behind, where they've said like they don't really want to be behind full dive, in part because they can't run it quite with the normal tracer play that you would. They have to sort of find alternate strategies. I mean, also, don't forget, we're going to have meta changes coming soon, right? Where Begita is coming in stage 4. Stage 4 is kind of a wild card, right? So you go back to the Matt interview we had the other week, where you have this idea that Outlaws do well with changes. They can just stabilize in the stage, even things out, have a middle of the road performance, not tank, but not win out, but do enough to stay in the conversation. Then you get to stage 4, you have sweeping meta changes, and you can be the kings of that with good coaching and good adaptability. There is a good possibility that it could get into the final stage playoffs at like 5th or 6th, and then once you're in the final stage play or the overall playoffs, who knows where it's going to go.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that we're in a good place. I think especially at the beginning of metas, I think these guys will flourish. I think that that's the most fun part about almost any game. Personally for me, I love the beginning of metas because it's all about, there's nothing that's really wrong yet. There's nothing that's fully defined at that time. You kind of have a bearing of like where you're supposed to go. You have an understanding of where north is, but how you get there, where you are on the map, how you find that guidance towards that point, it's all uncharted territory. And you get to come up with cool, creative ideas to really show not only your personality and what your team can do, but your own creativity, your own individuality behind it. So I don't know. I'm excited.
It's going to be fun.
Well, the cool thing about it, too, is that we might see a shift to potentially 3 support setups where, well, let me just say to our viewers, I realize a lot of people are not the biggest fans of Brigitte. Like, she is a very controversial hero, I understand. But from the competitive aspect of going, okay, what are teams going to run, there is sort of the idea being kicked around that teams might go, oh, we're going to run 3 support, where you would put an off-tank player, for example, for the Outlaws, you would put someone like Matt on the Brigitte, and like players are actually kind of excited about messing around with some of these changes. So there will be pretty wide sweeping changes. Now, of course, broader picture, do people always enjoy that hero? I mean, we'll see. It has been very divisive, but as far as the competitive side goes, it will lead to a bit of a storm, one way or another.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to follow that storm. Thanks, guys, for giving us all of your thoughts. And if any of you watching want to continue to hear our thoughts on the Outlaws and Overwatch League in general, make sure you click that subscribe button. And maybe if you really want to be up to date, make sure you also get notifications for whenever we post more amazing content like this. Outside of that, I just want to thank you all for coming out and watching us right now, and we'll see you next time on Owl's Nest.